You because I've been married to Mrs. Parks for 11 years. I'm Neal Parks, author, radio, TV personality, paranormal investigator, researcher, public speaker, and historian. This is a collage showing different areas of the world, mainly the United States, that I've been to and visited and investigated and written about. How many here watch the TV show Ghost Hunters, Paranormal State, or Ghost Adventures? Okay, all of those people are full of crap, so what I have to say is absolute truth today. What will I discuss today? The origins of a ghost story. Most importantly, beginning, middle, and ending. Because if you don't have one of those in mind, you're just going to be spinning in circles. How to create a character, their background, their family, fears, friends, and personality. The setting, location, time, and history. Of course, you could write about the school, you could write about the time you were at the school when you had lunch, the history of the school. Now, who am I? Just told you briefly, I'm an author who researches paranormal phenomenon, and I write books on this topic and how occurrences of the supernature affect people in the areas afflicted by these anomalies. And anomalies are weird occurrences, the unexplained. My team and I conduct all of the research and investigations for my books, and we not only investigate locally, but regionally, and when time allows us, we investigate throughout the United States. For example, Gettysburg, Salem, Massachusetts, Boston, New York City, North Carolina. My main focus is on ghostly and spiritual encounters and haunted locations. However, I do research, and my wife makes fun of me for this, I do research UFOs, crop formations, Bigfoot, the Mothman, other strange creatures that have not been identified through by science. I have been doing this kind of research for over 20 years. My first book, that was published in 2008, is titled Paranormal Chronicles. I just bit my tongue when I was talking. Tales of humor, horror, and the absolutely strange. Haunted Chillicothe was the second book that I released, titled Haunted Chillicothe, True Ghost Stories, Tales, Legends, and Folklore. Biting my tongue really hurt. I'm the founder of Parks Paranormal Research and Investigation, and a few of you hold in your hands right now my third book and best effort to date, Haunted Holidays, Tales of Inspiration, Terror, and Reflection, which takes elements and strange occurrences between Halloween, Thanksgiving, yeah, ghost turkeys, right? Christmas, which is one of the best Christmas stories, ghost stories ever told. Mrs. Parks goes over it with you. Well, I don't know if she has yet. A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens classic. And of course, New Year's Eve. So what I'm going to do for you right now, I'm going to read one story from my new book, which a few of you hold in your hands right now. It's titled Sweet Spirits. I'll be reading it on the Kindle version, which it is available for download through Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, ebooks.com, and through my publisher, synergybooks.com. With Halloween just around the corner, Neal couldn't wait to meet with the organizers of the tour. It was his first year working on the Ghost Walk in Chillicothe. The walk was a great event. It allowed people in the community to volunteer their time to open some of the areas in the town that were normally not open to the public. People in the community would come out to learn a little more about the historic downtown and hopefully get a little scare as well. Perfect for Halloween. As an added bonus, the money raised from the tour went to a great cause, the League of Women's Voters. They organize the event each year as a part of their major fundraising efforts. Neal felt super excited. Neal, that being me, he couldn't believe they had called to ask him to help them investigate all of the buildings they would be using this year for the event. Neal had recently published his first book about paranormal occurrences, and in a small town like Chillicothe, they were already considering him an expert and a celebrity in the field. Neal looked down at Lucas, his 2-year-old son. It always amazed him how interesting Luke could make life seem. Here they were standing inside of a store Neal had been to at least 100 times over his lifetime. Lloyd's Sweet Shop. And Lucas's wide-eyed childish wonder made it seem like he was seeing it for the first time. I want, Luke said. His mouth hung open and his face was pressed up against the glass of one of the long displays of chocolate candy. Sure, buddy, Neal said. Just a minute. Neal walked over to the counter and handed the lady behind the counter a $5 bill. I'd like a few dollars worth of your chocolate coins, please. Great, here you go. The cashier handed him some change and the candy in a brown paper bag. Neal snickered inside as he handed a few of the chocolate coins to Lucas. Thinking that his wife wouldn't be too happy knowing that he was letting Luke have all of his candy, he soothed his conscience by telling himself that he would split the bag with Lucas. Besides, how could you say no when he looked into those adorable eyes? Just then Neal noticed Bart Henshaw walking into the shop. This was his point of contact for the League of Women's Voters. Bart had a history of working closely through the years with local and regional historians, and brought with her a wealth of information. "Hello, Bart," Neal said. "Ready to get started?" "Absolutely. It's an honor to finally meet you," Bart replied. "And this must be little Lucas, who I've heard so much about." "Correct. This is my right-hand man." Luke smiled at Bart, who looked up with smeared chocolate coins all over his teeth. Bart shifted her tote bag off of her right arm and pulled out a folder. "Let's make our way to the outside. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this gem." Neal grabbed Lucas and maneuvered him up and securely onto his right hip. They exited Lloyd's and stood a few feet from the entryway. Bart looked down at her folder and carefully considered the most important historical and ghostly tidbits to share with Neal. "Okay, Neal, your spot during the ghost walk will be in the upstairs main room. You'll have about 15 minutes per group for your presentations. This area will be lots of fun for you. It was built in 1843, and not only has it been a candy shop, but it has also been a music hall, a grocery store, and even used at one time as a brothel. It is said to be very haunted. I'll start with the rumors of footsteps being heard from the upstairs and doors slamming. This has been a staple among the previous owners all the way up to the current owners. People even claim to see a woman in the upstairs kitchen, and the sounds of old-time parlor music can be heard playing at all hours of the night," Bart added. Neal was getting more excited by the minute. "That sounds great. Let's get started." Bart didn't hesitate to unlock the door, which led upstairs. This was not her first time above the candy shop. Want me to pause?
Yeah.
Wish I had some old music.
Oh, of course they hung up. Ah! Okay, go ahead.
All right. Bart didn't hesitate to unlock the door, which led upstairs. This was not her first time above the candy shop. In fact, she had led a psychic medium through the same area the week before in order to get her impression of the paranormal activity that existed within those four walls. Bart was excited to get Neal's impression of the area. Perhaps Neal's research, when completed, would authenticate the findings reported by the psychic, Bart thought to herself. The moment Neal looked at the stairway he was about to climb, he was taken aback. The stairs sat at a very steep incline and were very old and narrow. He wondered how Lucas would deal with the climb. Bart led the way up the stairs with Neal and Lucas not far behind, if not a bit slower. As he ventured onward, Neal could almost feel his shoulders rubbing on both sides of the walls as he climbed the stairs. He was hoping that Luke wouldn't get smushed against the walls of the stairway. The air was thick with mildew and the smell of rotting paint and wallboard. For a brief second, Neal pondered going back downstairs. He knew Luke sometimes had bad allergies, and he didn't want to bring him into a place that could stir them up. He lolled in the middle of the staircase to look for Luke's reaction to all of the smells. Luke's face was buried in the bag of chocolate that he had wrestled from his father's hands on the way up the staircase. He didn't even seem to notice. With that, Neal decided to climb the rest of the way up. The light from the battery-operated candles and Bart's handheld flashlight guided their pathway, as the rooms were dimly lit. Bart led them into a main room with a kitchen and bathroom to the right. To the left, Neal could see 3 smaller rooms and a much larger adjoined room off of that. "Wow, I didn't realize this place was so big," Neal said. Lucas wiggled in his father's arms until Neal finally set him free. "Stay close, buddy. I don't want you wandering off too far." Lucas turned back and smiled, and Neal began to walk around the main room. To be honest, the whole place sort of gave him the creeps. It smelled very strange, and for some reason, the room seemed much colder than it had been outside just a few moments before. He suddenly noticed that he could see his breath, and that Bart had moved on into other rooms. "Bart!" he called out. "Where are you?" "I'm in the room in the back," she responded. Neal shined his light on Lucas, fully covered in chocolate face. Lucas had just begun to laugh quietly. "I share, Daddy, I share." "No, sweetie, Daddy doesn't need any more candy right now. You enjoy it." He reached down, grabbed Luke's hand, and headed into the direction he had heard Bart's voice. Lucas braced his feet and began to whimper. My friend, he called out. I am your friend, Luke. What are you talking about? Come on, let's go. Daddy's got work to do. Neal grabbed Luke around his waist, hoisted him up in the air, and forced him into his arms. Oddly, Lucas didn't seem to mind this and be paying much attention. And as they walked into the next room, Lucas continued to point and laugh over Neal's shoulder. Maybe he needed a nap, Neal thought. They quickly joined Bart. Neal was surprised to find that this room was decently lit by battery-powered candles, and much warmer than the room that they had just come from. He secretly wondered if maybe the old building had some heating problems. Bart was looking at the old bookshelf in the corner and checking out the room's features. This would be a perfect place for you to set up your book signing, she said. This place is a little dusty, but nothing our cleaning crews can't handle before the walk. Yeah, this looks great. I think I could even set up my tables right over there, Neal replied. He grabbed his tape measure, set Luke down on the floor. Here, Neal said as he handed Lucas a few toy cars from his bag. He began measuring the space for the proposed tables. All of a sudden, out of the corner of his eye, Neal noticed that Lucas was quietly babbling to something or someone. It almost sounded like Luke was singing a song, though one from long ago. Bart noticed Neal's distraction and walked over to where Luke was sitting. She figured that she maybe could keep the little guy company for a bit while his father finished up. As she approached, she heard him humming a familiar tune. But where had she heard it from? She couldn't quite place it. She pushed her thoughts to the back of her mind and knelt down beside the child. Cool cards you got there, buddy, she said. Want some company? No, Wyatt play, Luke said. She figured he must have been referring to an imaginary friend. He seemed perfectly happy, so she decided to let him be. She watched him for a few minutes, and then turned back to Neal, who had just finished up. Neal looked at Bart and remembered that he still had a couple of questions to ask her. He took out his notebook and pen and began to read off the list. So how long for each group? Do I need to watch to make sure that those entering have tickets? And other than me and the guide, do you plan on including anything else at this location? Neal rattled off. Suddenly, Neal noticed that the chill had returned to the room as well. Bart began to answer Neal's questions. Each tour should take about 5 minutes. And yes, they should have a ticket in their hands. When they enter, actually, thanks for reminding me. I thought it would be really cool to set up a CD player to play music from the building's dance hall days. In fact, I already found a CD that matches the historical accounts as to what they actually used to play in the building. All of a sudden, chills ran down Bart's arms. No, it couldn't be. Yet it was. That song that Lucas had been singing. It was one of the songs from the CD. I was intending to play it during the ghost walk. That was why it seemed so familiar. Neal looked at Bart, and her face had the strangest look of amazement on it. She had just remained standing there, frozen in the corner. Are you all right? He asked. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Luke push his car in the direction of the corner of the room. There was something on the ground near the corner. In fact, there were 3 somethings. But what were they? They shone off of his flashlight, and he shined it in that direction. But then Bart said, I think we are really going to have some ghosts on this walk. This location seems pretty active to me. Before he could respond, he noticed that Bart's eyes had never left Lucas. How long has Lucas had an imaginary friend? She asked. He doesn't, Neal replied. Why? Just then, Lucas's car raced to the corner. If he hadn't seen it, he wouldn't have believed it. Just at the right second, he turned his head to look at Luke. All of a sudden, he saw the car turn around and race back to Lucas on its own. Neal immediately broke from his concentration and moved to that corner. What in the world? Did you see that? Neal said. Bart just stood there and shook her head up and down, still frozen in place in the corner. Car, Daddy, car, Lucas sputtered. Neal realized that his foot had stopped the car's movement and brought it to a rest a few feet in front of him. Neal moved to the corner to investigate further. It was there in the corner that he saw the shiny things he had noticed earlier. They were chocolate coin wrappers. All of the chocolate had been licked clean out of them. But Luke hadn't been to the corner. Then Neal noticed that the room had returned to a normal temperature once again. He looked down at Lucas to make sure that he was okay. Wyatt gone now? He likes chocolate, Lucas said. Bart and Neal just looked at each other in amazement. Neal grabbed Luke close to him and held them tight and looked at Luke's smiling face. Well, it sure is a good thing Wyatt lives in a candy shop, huh, Luke? Neal said. I don't know how any of you teachers talk that long without losing your voice. It's tough, right? Chillicothe haunted hotspots. How many have heard of the Majestic Theater? The Ashley House on 104 used to be known as the Canal House also. The Canal Warehouse on Main Street across from Sack and Save in Trinity. And then, of course, the men's shop. The upstairs ballroom is known to have some activity in that area. Now, the investigation that we did in the Majestic Theater was March of 2009. Some of the images we captured. You always get these things in pictures and locations where ghosts allegedly appear and exist. They're known as orbs. Now, an easy way to tell the difference between one and the other, these can be described as orbs. They're dust particles or moisture particles. Now, this is significant because it's a solid mass. You don't see through it, and it seems to have electromagnetic properties to it, as if to come out of some sort of source, whether it be man-made or supernatural. And another student earlier today pointed out that in this corner of the stage, there appears to be a little girl standing there in a white gown. So Mrs. Parks zoomed in on this, and you can see it a lot clearer at that point. But right here, I'm sorry? You can? Okay. I myself just see a white haze when you look at it this way, but apparently it's more defined when you zoom in on it. And that's the main stage of the Majestic. This is the balcony where the seats have names on the armrests from people who donated money to the Majestic to help restore it. And this front seat up here was interesting because I heard the seat portion where it folds open close on its own and smack the back of the seat. So I took a picture of it, and it looks like the back of a head appeared here. And the really neat thing about some of the stories that come out of the Majestic, a lot of people can see feet dangling off of the balcony, or when people are practicing and rehearsing for plays that are coming up, they finish their lines, and then someone in the balcony is clapping, but there's no one there to be seen. This is Blood Alley, which is between the Majestic and a white house that used to be a morgue. They would pump blood out of the corpses from the flu outbreak of 1918 because there wasn't enough room in the morgues to keep them, so they were actually stockpiling bodies in the bottom of Cross Keys Tavern, at the bottom of the Majestic, and several other locations throughout town, even some private residences. And they had nowhere else to keep the blood, so they were pumping it out into the alleys so it would go down the drain system. This is the boiler room. Everyone who goes in here feels spooked, feels like they need to be moving along, rushing out, or something is about to grab them. And this pipe is attached to the boiler. It hasn't been working for some time now, but anyone who comes in here to take pictures, they always get this foggy mister on the boiler. And this is the third floor of the Majestic Theater. I call it the dimensional crack. What's really neat is when you take the picture of a flat wooden floor, you get this strange lightning effect, almost like something in motion. You get a second shot, and it seems to be stretching out longer and going a little bit further. So you could call it a ghost snake, too. Now this is the phantom man who wanders the aisles of the Majestic. I don't know if any of you have heard the story about the man in the top hat and the cane that will walk straight out and then disappear in front of the stage. That's because the floor used to be level and not sloped. But we got what I like to call footprints from the man walking down the aisle in a completely black theater. And this is a picture taken by Mrs. Parks' sister-in-law inside a dressing room where she took a picture in front of the mirror. And right here you get the outline of a man's body wearing a white button-down shirt, the collar is flipped over, and here's the head. So I like to call that one an actor awaiting his cue. So this is going up to the second floor, the main stairway. Exit sign right here with the spotlight off to the side. You can see the word exit in that window. That makes sense, that's reflection. But up here, what doesn't make sense is this strange hot pink orb and that white translucent haze orb, and then this strange streak of lightning coming off of his jeans. And this is what caught my attention before, but the funny thing about shutter speed on new digital technology, If you move just the slightest bit, it makes normal spotlights or normal traffic lights dance around. And it looks like it's in movement, and that's just an abnormality with photography. But later, I continued to examine the photograph and noticed that there's a man standing right here. Full shadowed body figure with a head up here.
I can't see it. Oh, yeah. You can see it.
Looks like he has a long nose. It took me almost a year before I even noticed that one there. I was paying too much attention to the other dancing light. This is the Carnegie Library in Washington Courthouse. We did an investigation there, and ironically enough, we're standing in front of the fiction section, which is really cute. And you might recognize Yolanda Harris from Fox 28 News. She documented the investigation and brought her cameraman with her, and then they had me as a guest a few months later on Good Day Columbus to do a segment, and they did a whole episode of us, middle of May, I think it was, 2010. Paranormal images. This was an image submitted to us by Mrs. Parks' mother, who had a coworker at that time, when she was before retirement.
She was going around taking pictures of her house, just random pictures in the room. And in one of the rooms when she developed the film, she caught this picture. You can see a baby.
So we went to the house and noticed all of these framed pictures of her deceased mother and her deceased brother, and both of them looked like that face. So it's hard to tell if that is possibly her mother stopping by to say hello or her brother stopping by to say hello. This is a restored cabin in Sabina, Ohio that used to be connected to the Underground Railroad in the South. It was dismantled and brought into Sabina so they could do reenactments there to educate children on the Underground Railroad in the Civil War era. This is just a regular sleeping loft here and the fireplace, and coming from the upstairs loft, this white swoosh of light, something coming down just to say hello. And she did not see it when she took the picture until after it showed up in the viewfinder. This is an old cemetery in Georgia. Old tombstones, headstones, and on top of this tree, this strange hot pink bell emitting a pink line of light. Same bell moves from that tree and hovers above that monument. So I zoom, oh, no, it's not there anymore, never mind, but you zoom in on it, and it's just translucent pink light. I'm not sure what's causing it. It could be a hot pink swirl or just a strange anomaly. This is a crop formation. Anyone familiar with crop formations? This one popped up in 2003 in a soybean field across from the Site Mountains in Bainbridge, Ohio. This is one that popped up in a soybean field in Peebles, Ohio, across from the Serpent Mountains. Are you familiar with the Serpent Mounds? And the crazy thing about all of these formations that are popping up, they're popping up near sacred sites, Indian burial grounds, earthworks, Native American sites. They all seem to be popping up across the road from these areas. And as far as what's making them, it's hard to tell. No one really knows. I don't think a 2x4 or guys with four-wheelers did this, unless they had eyes in the sky through satellite technology to make those kind of grooves. Yeah, these people are crazy. Now, if it was just a perfect circle, yeah, that could be a prank, but it wouldn't be a perfect circle. It's not full 360-degree angles, because you can't get them on the ground unless you use lasers. What?
Maybe they're advanced geometry.
Advanced geometry rednecks, yeah, on four-wheelers. Now, this is a covered bridge that was used as an advertisement for Terror in the Hills out by Charleston Pike, the outdoor haunted house they do in the woods. And the funny thing about that, I noticed the image, I was thinking, is that the moon? So I zoom in on it. Of course it's not the moon, it's a strange energy haze orb. And it's the only one out there. It's perfect circumference. This was an image of a man mowing the lawn with his grandson. I think his grandson spilled some Kool-Aid or something. He really drools a lot. But this next image shows all of this strange smoky haze around them. And then the third image shows the same thing, but it's formed differently. And of course, Mrs. Parks, being the skeptic she is, says that the person taking the picture could have been smoking, or the fact that it's at night, and what comes out of a lawnmower? Fumes. Could have been that. But I like to think that maybe it was Casper, because the kid seems to notice it because he's pointing at it. So maybe he's amazed by smoke coming out of a lawnmower. I don't know, but it's still a neat picture nonetheless. This is a 300-year-old cemetery in Beaufort, North Carolina. I'm just taking random shots of the dark area here of the cemetery where all of these headstones are placed. And there are pirates buried here, World War I and II soldiers, Civil and Revolutionary War soldiers, and sailors. Now this is a banana tree. I'm sorry? Blackbeard's wife. Blackbeard the pirate's wife. Yeah, it's third or fourth wife. That's a banana tree. Banana trees are non-reflective last time I checked, so I zoom in on that one alone, and it's a strange white blob with a purple haze. Some electromagnetic property. I'm not sure what it could be connected to or why it's there, but it was really neat nonetheless. Same cemetery, but that's a stone mausoleum we're taking a photograph of. Mrs. Parks captured this one, and we noticed this in the center, so I enlarged it, and it looks like a green sleeve with a hand coming out grabbing onto a lantern.
It does. It looks like aliens, actually.
Like a bunch of hands coming out of the mausoleum. Now this is Crybaby Bridge, Crybaby Tunnel, whatever part of the county you're from. It goes by two different names. This is a person sitting in their car having the picture taken. This is a person sitting in their car while the picture is being taken. And you can see the car is parked at an angle, looks like an old station wagon. And someone was just taking a photograph of the graffiti that goes through the tunnel. And obviously someone's standing here because you can see an image of a person in the background, like they were trying to photograph that. But the funny thing is, that popped up in the center of all of it and kind of ended up drowning out the rest of the image around it. Looks kind of like a mouth with two eyes and a nose, or maybe a nose with two eyes and a mouth. Or it could be a nose with a mouth and two eyes. I mean, it's open to interpretation. It's really weird.
It looks like it has a beard.
Kind of like, but Mrs. Parks, of course, thinks that it's just smoke.
I also think it's a possibility that it could be, I mean, think about it. It's
Exhaust.
and it's in a tunnel, and it's cold out, so from the back of the car you have exhaust. So the exhaust hits the tunnel wall, and then
Causes a reflection from the flash.
whatever you believe. Alright guys, pay attention.
Okay, this is from the Birdcage Theater in Arizona. It's an old ghost town, but it's a tourist attraction. This is known as a widow's wagon. This is basically the horse-drawn carriage where they take the caskets of dead children, husbands, or wives, and the family members who were left behind have to ride up front and look through like a black veil out at the people before they go to the cemetery. And there appears to be a face in that black veil peering out at you. So I zoom in on it, and you can really tell that there's a nose, an eye, it looks like they're sad. This picture was submitted to me by Jason Halls from the TV show Taps, Ghost Hunters. He had me take a look at it and get my impression on it. This is the guest house bed and breakfast, the courtyard. And we have what looks like snowflakes. It was a clear night in October, and it was actually the weekend before Halloween in 2007. And it looked like snowflakes, but that back courtyard area, we were getting some really interesting readings. There were no power lines, no sources of water anywhere above or below us. And these four, what I call dancing orbs, appeared next to the scarecrow after taking the picture. This is Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 2012. We took a pleasure trip through that in Salem, Massachusetts, and Bar Harbor, Maine. It was a really good time. And Mrs. Parks took this picture, what looks like cannon fire, or maybe a gunshot, in the tree line. You would think maybe following this man, you see his face riding a horse.
But it depends on your you know, and it's reflecting as we're moving, and that's just the,
And there's smoke everywhere. Yeah, exactly. This was a picture I took in Hillsboro, Ohio in 2011 of the horizon before dusk. And as I pulled up the viewfinder to look through it, I see this, but when I pull the viewfinder down, I don't see it. So I brought it back up and took a picture. And these I saw no matter what. They're just round cloud formations. This one I found interesting because of the strange electric pulse that's in the center, like a beam of light almost. If you can't identify it and it's in the sky, it doesn't necessarily make it a spaceship or a craft carrying green little men. It could be a UFO, which is an unidentified flying object. That makes sense. And it could be smoke, too. A smoking cloud. Now, the more important part, the time has come to pay attention really close now, because I'm going to teach you how to write a story. I'm sure your teachers have already done it, but I'm going to teach you the abridged version. Would you consider this abridged? Yeah, it's a formula. The important part of mapping out your story before you begin. First and foremost, you think about characters. What did I do on the Lloyd Sweet Shop story? I introduced myself, my son, and Bart Henshaw. Those were the characters. Decide the physical and personality traits of your characters. Obviously, a trait could be that my son really loved chocolate. I had a hunger for adventure, so I went into this investigation. Think about setting and what settings would work best for your characters. The setting at that point in time was the sweet shop. Brainstorm what these settings would feel like, smell like, look like, and what emotions would a character undergo here. Think about the conflicts your characters will undergo. You decide if they will face internal or external conflicts, and how many, and whether those conflicts will be, and I'm sure Mrs. Sparks has told you, man versus society, or man versus nature, and with who or what they will face these conflicts. I hear whispering. Chart out what your story will look like, a basic outline, and finally, you write your rough draft. And Mrs. Parks has pounded this into my head time and time again. If you want to do the story right and make it count and make it worth reading, you got to go through your story with a fine-tooth comb, look at your word choice, use good details, punctuation. If you don't put good punctuation in here, people are going to think you're an idiot. Capitalization, where the sentence starts. Learn to stop a sentence where it stops and start a new sentence. Use proper punctuation. And finally, the flow of your story and the way you link one paragraph to the next. Then you write a second draft, a third draft, and a fourth draft. And you keep improving your story till it is the best it can be. Major tip, read aloud to yourself. Don't read it in your mind, read it out loud with your voice, and then have someone else look at it, because your eyes will see it the way that your mind projected originally, and you may not be reading it the right way. So right now we have the question portion, and I need questions, not just, hey, I saw a ghost dog. What does that mean? I need a real question.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes.
How old were you when you first started this?
I was 5.
What was it?
It was my grandmother's house.
And what kind of ghost was it?
My grandfather.
Cool.
White shirt. Hoodie shirt.
Have you heard of the Mothman?
Yes, I have. I've been to the Mothman Festival. I've been a guest speaker there. And I've worked closely with people who do investigations there.
I think those two hands were Mothman.
You think what?
That those two hands were Mothman.
The 2 hands were Mothman? Which 2 hands?
The ones from
The
Oh, you think the 2 hands that were in North Carolina belong to the Mothman? Okay.
possibility.
Yeah. Yes.
Are you in the Parks Paranormal?
I am Parks Paranormal.
What is it?
Parks Paranormal Research and Investigation. Okay. Yeah, that's my research team. It's like TAPS.
Anything that he researches things before he goes and writes the story, he has to do investigations, and
Yeah, that was completely real. That
So
happened
it's
like
not
that.
really like classic.
Yeah.
Now there are some things when you write a story that aren't always exactly the way they happen. You change,
You take creative freedoms with it.
and you add more details. Because sometimes you might hear a story that's really short, and put it in a book and it's much longer.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you just said I went to the cemetery, saw ghosts, and went home, right at home. That's not very interesting.
Yeah, that's known as a retelling.
Yeah, so sometimes you really have to put a lot more detail into a story if someone wanted to.
There's an at Majestic. Have you ever seen the ghost? There's supposed to be like on the top floor. There's a guy that's supposed to be looking down at you. If you ever see that.
I've not seen the one looking down at me.
But he has cameras.
Yeah, I have seen something at the Majestic that was a janitor.
It didn't really exist.
I'm sorry.
I said, but the gender didn't really exist.
Yeah, he walked through a door. Striped shirt.
No, I think you meant
Yeah, stripe. You're checker.
That.
That's stripe.
You come here.
So, do you even believe in ghosts?
Depends on what your interpretation of the word ghost is. Could be an angel, could be a strange source of energy that's trapped in space and time playing itself over and over.
Could be smoke.
Could be smoke. Could be a ghost that smokes. I do.
Okay, now the checkered kid.
Checkered kid.
Have you ever been to one of the stories?
I have several times.
Been to what?
I think that that's just an area where a lot of people go and scare themselves silly. The site itself used to be a sacred site for Native Americans to come and meet and greet and trade and tell stories to each other. Then it became farmland, so that sacred site was desecrated by the Western world. Then it became a wildlife reserve, so it has just a slew of energy flowing around, both man and animal and ancient. Striped white shirt.
Do you have ghosts like your house?
At my house, no. No, they don't really hang out with me that much.
And our house is newer, so.
Yeah, we have a newer house.
We might have some.
Already walked through the property before we bought it, just to make sure. Girl in the gray hoodie.
You can see that in the basket. There's a little girl that bounced the ball. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of the little girl that hangs out in the dressing rooms that died as a result of smoke inhalation from the fire in the 1940s. She was running through the underground tunnel that connected the theater to the hotel, and she's the one who allegedly hangs out in the dressing rooms and peeks in at people when they're dressing. I'll have to try that sometime, like bring a red balloon or something, or give her a bouncing ball. On the top floor, that's a different girl then. I've not heard of that one. We need to go back on. Mrs. Parks, schedule that. No, I can't bring underage people with me. Especially not genetically connected to me. Boy in the blue in the back. The witch that lives in Ohio? Roams.
In northern Ohio.
Oh, in northern Ohio. Now, I've not heard of the witch that roams the woods in northern Ohio, but I have heard of the pig-faced guy that lives in the woods in northern Ohio. Yeah, he apparently has a pig face. Boy in the black t-shirt with the arm up?
Yep.
Now all the way in the back?
Like you know the tree where she come towards you and you just like walk maybe like 30 yards
Near the tree line?
yeah. Just like go back, walk in through the tree, go back. Like if it was one, you just step in and work circle one time.
Well, I've not heard of that, but I do know with the tree that's there, there have been times where I've stood next to it and I've smelled like a weird scent of strawberry. Boy in the white shirt with the glasses.
when you know that photo that, the guy on the horse right from the bullet? Well, if you look closer, it didn't look like the guy on the horse. If you look in front, it looks like you're trying to grab an antler. It looks like you're trying to grab one of them, and then the bullet was running after it.
Like maybe he was riding out and
Yeah.
holding on to something
Yeah,
or
like
trying to reach for it.
running, and then
That would be possible because a lot of them did their journeys at night to send messages back and forth.
Because it kind of looked like you were trying to grab an antler.
That's a possibility. Girl with the furry wrap.
In the summer, I was in the production of Oliver, and sometimes when me and a couple of my friends were changing, nobody would be in the hall, and the door would open, and I would take people. That's just the French school.
Grace, you got a question?
You should have followed it up with, what does that mean?
Yeah. What does that mean?
I don't know if it was like one of the boys, or it was, there's a lot of people, I think, but there's a few
Boy with both arms like that.
I was at my grandma's house, and my grandpa passed away. We were taking his funeral right there, and I went to this. We went outside and started doing stuff. Well, I started hearing the lawnmower mowing, and my cousin went out there, and we didn't hear it, and it stopped.
So you heard a lawnmower, but there was nothing out there? What does that mean? Okay. Could have been a neighbor, could have been maybe something bad happened with a lawnmower years ago where somebody whacked off a major appendage and bled to death, and that's the ghost lawnmower.
Could be your grandmother.
Could be your grandfather.